Black women navigating the halls of education.
The struggle is real. Thanks for tuning in to Women in Color. I'm Cheryl, and I'll be joined by my co-host Shurnette and guests Debbie and Ella. We're continuing the conversation on racism in education. Debbie and Ella will share a bit about their experience to and through post-secondary schooling. You'll get insights into some of the challenges faced by Black women in education and what needs to happen to dismantle systemic racism. But first, listen to this. When we were little, my mother used to tell me and my sister that if we wanted to succeed in this country, we would have to work harder because we were Black. Nothing will come as easily to you as it does to white people, she used to say. My response was always, no, your advice is off. I will be judged fairly based on my intelligence, not my skin color. But my first year in college, I learned my mother was right all along. I had written my first essay about the risks and struggles youth face for an English class, and it was the perfect topic. I was a youth leader in my community, and I had a passion for working with young people. Plus, I loved writing, and I had a flair for storytelling. Shortly after handing in the paper, my English professor, a white woman, called me into her office. I was so confused when she asked me what source I had used to plagiarize my essay. She said, "I don't believe you're capable of writing at this level." Those were her exact words. I remember them. I told her I didn't plagiarize anything, but she didn't believe me. It took the intervention of another professor, a white male, to prove that I actually had exceptional writing skills. What astounded me was that my English professor didn't have a single point of reference to measure that essay against. It was the first I had handed in to her, but she saw me, a young Black woman, and decided that the writing was too advanced for my intelligence and my ability. I was angry and disappointed. I'd worked so hard on that paper. I took a complaint to the dean, another white woman. Sure, she said, she was sorry that it happened to me, but nothing came of that complaint. That English professor continued to teach, and there was no follow-up after that. I had to come to the conclusion that the dean's placating words were simply not sincere. From that day on, it was clear that I would have to work harder as a Black person to prove that I'm just as capable as a white person. Higher learning would have its own unique challenges for me, and so would the journey beyond that. So I'm excited about having Debbie and Ella join us. Thinking back to Sisters Reading, the book club, that was really the beginning of consciousness for me.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful time where I found a group of women who just reinforced the beauty and strength of being a Black woman. So I am looking forward to this conversation.
I lived in the country in Jamaica. So when I came here, I remember it was a cold winter, December, and I looked out the plane and I thought, oh, this must be close to heaven. With the snow falling, I was quite enthused, being a 12-year-old, live in the country, never seen anyone of color except for Black. I was quite sheltered. And so that really stood out for me, just the diversity in Canada here and just the beauty of it from the time before I land.
I was born actually in England, and because that's where my mother was a student. And then actually I then immigrated to St. Vincent, where my parents are from. And I lived with my grandmother until I was 6 years old. So I was thinking about this, about my first experience or what I thought. I think for me, being so young, what I remember was that my parents wanted to get me involved with anything Canadian. So I came here in the summer, just before school started. It would have been September. I came in August. And after, the first settling of school, then it was going to be skating season. So it was moving into the winter time. And I remember I think it was my mother who put me in skating. So it was just kind of like, you're going to do everything that's Canadian, right?
Mm-hmm. And so for like many kids who come from the Caribbean, you automatically have an accent. And so you're placed a year behind. You're made fun of by the kids. The teachers really treat you like an outcast. So I think my first experience in realize the systemic piece was just how I was treated inside in the school. I was a feisty 12-year-old that wouldn't take anything. So I fight my way through a lot of things, which I think for me was really positive, and somehow it's some negative, because when I didn't internalize it so much, at 12, I fight through it. A bunch of white kids call me the N-word, and I chased him all the way to his house with the projector. So, I fight. So kids sort of knew at one point who they could sort of bullied, but then over time and seeing in the schools and the way teachers would speak to me, you sort of recognize it and you hear, okay, this is what this is, right?
Because as you're talking, Debbie, I'm thinking how opposite I was. Being called an N-word, I ran home crying. And my mother said to me after enough crying, stop coming home crying, stand up and fight back.
I don't know the statistics, but I would venture to think that the majority of kids who are bullied and ostracized, especially based off of color, wouldn't fight back and, fight their oppressors back, but they would fall into, what other ills happen when you're being bullied.
Yeah, it's true.
And I remember when I first started school, I guess it would have been grade 1, because I came here when I was 6. I was put into a class for people who spoke English as a second language. So when I came from St. Vincent, obviously I had an accent. And I didn't understand at the time why I was going into the class, right? It was just part of school. I went to one place and then they told me to go to another place with a different teacher. Okay. And then maybe it wasn't very long. Maybe it was maybe 6 months or so. And then I went back to my regular class, right? I guess they figured out I could speak English at that time. I don't know. Right. So I remember that happening. And in the school I went to, there were lots of different types of cultures and ethnicities. But I remember we had a group of friends who obviously identified as racialized people. And we were kind of our own little group. And every Friday, there'd always be some sort of argument because someone was called the N-word. And you have to fight, right? If you get called that, you're going to fight that person, right? Wow. So I remember those kind of things, like kid things. But, and maybe at the time, maybe even the kids that were saying the word, they didn't know what it meant. But, my parents would tell me, people are not going to like you because of your color, right? So I had that basic understanding. And I remember a specific incident after school. We're in the front, we're getting ready to go home. And he came up behind me and called me the N-word, and he hit my friend. She was Jamaican Chinese. He hit her, not hard, but he hit her like, I don't like you. And then that day, that was it. It was on. And I remember chasing him from like the beginning of the school, near the street, into where the school entrance was. And when I got to the school entrance, like I put my hand up like I was going to hit him. And I said, you never do that again. Like I remember just being so angry because it had been building up. And I remember seeing one of the teachers, and she was a white teacher, in the window, and she was looking at us, what was happening, but she didn't say anything. She looked and then she looked away. But sometimes, like, especially when you're that age, that's what people understand. Like, I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm not going to let you, like, continuously, do that, right? And I felt better after, because I knew that he's not going to bother me, and I felt, oh, okay, then I can live my life, right? I don't need to
and you can
fear that anymore,
and not fear that that one child anymore, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it was more in the curriculum, for example. So what I did was when I write my paper was correcting the wrong. So I always focus on, this is what my paper is going to be about. I went to Windsor, and I think when I went to York to do my social work, right, I made sure to just sort of highlight some of the oppression that was within the schools, you know, within the curriculum. So I did that piece. I didn't, you know, I just always made it a duty to, when I write, that it is going to always come back to what knowledge is. So, yeah.
Okay, all right.
She did tell me about more things that are like, you know, not having a Black teacher, you know, not seeing a Black teacher for, you know, maybe not until she got into university right now, that kind of experience. So, and I know for myself, that was also a common experience, not seeing really a Black professor or Black instructors that would teach me directly. So that I think still goes on, but sometimes it depends on the program that you're in. So she may not see in her program, you know, you might see less people of color, maybe only 3 or 4 other students in her program might be Black or racialized people. So again, I think that's a very common, I remember that myself going through university. And again, not maybe seeing yourself represented, you know, in those images.
I'm curious to take a step back and know when each of you knew that it was time to have that conversation, that preparatory conversation on race dynamics with your kids, and how, like, what that mental thought process was, what you said to yourself, and how you actually executed that discussion.
I think it depends on each child's development stage, and you started from birth, right? So we always made it our parent and vision with our kids that as soon, you know, we ingrained we did a lot of cultural stuff with our kids. And we made sure that, you know, and the kids always say that now, that we put them in things that, you know, break that, that box that, oh, Black kids don't do that. We made sure our kids did everything of the opposite. They didn't like it because they will say to me, Mom, we're the only Black kids here. And I said, wonderful. Then that will encourage more Black kids to join.
I would agree. I think it was once she was going into grade 1, grade 2, because what was happening was, like, then kids were, oh, I'm not going to play with you because, you know, you're brown or you're Black. And so obviously she's confused, right? So come home, oh, they don't want to play with, this person doesn't want to play with me because they say I'm Black or something. And then that's where it leads to the conversation that, you know, yeah, unfortunately, there are people who think like this. They're not going to like you because of your color. And, you know, you can't, there are other kids you can play with, you know, such as, and you might name the friends you have. And, you know, that's just unfortunately something that happens. And I think that's where the first conversation for me started, when that happened in the school playground.
What do you think needs to happen to finally eradicate systemic racism in education in order to give Black women an opportunity to get to experience equality and eventually success in their paths as they go?
Wow.
I know it's a big question.
Exposure to all the different cultures, obviously of Black people, and specifically that have helped to shape Canada. Looking back from the time when I was, you know, starting school to now, even, you know, we didn't really learn a lot about the impacts of Black people within our society. So I think we have to start with that, and starting when people are very young, all the way up to our age now, right? That continuous education, I think, is important.
Until you recognize your privileges, someone always have to step over someone to be where they're at, right? And so I think, like Ella was saying, education and also call it for what it is, right? It's unfortunate, I think, even as Black women, you get tired of the fighting, you get tired of always correcting, right? And I think sometimes, you know, we get compliance where we just sort of, we go with the flow of where things are at. And right now it's really good that things are shaken up, right? Because that's how change will even start to occur. But I think the biggest piece is also the education, right? And speak your experience, you know, like have the conversation continuously and call things for what they are.
And because I think Debbie said, you know, you get tired, right? So
Yeah.
I would say sometimes you have to be mindful of what is the battle you want to fight. So when something happens, okay, you're going to have to expend energy. So you have to make sure you're ready to face that, whatever it is. And I don't want to see this as a negative way, but there's some things sometimes may not be worth you trying to to fight against, because it may take more than just that one incident. You know what I'm not sure if you know what I mean.
Sorry, is it maybe the principle of lose the battle to win the war?
Yeah, because you can get tired if every time, like even in your day, if every time you had to confront someone, every time you think that this may be happening, you'd be very tired, right? Obviously, there are things that you may have to speak up against, one of my daughter's classes, the professor would always get her confused with maybe another Black student, right? Like another name, calling you the wrong name. So yeah, you may have to correct that a few times to get it right. You know what I mean? But sometimes I think that you have to be ready to say, what am I willing to put that energy into? Because there could be so many things that are happening that it's going to be depleting you as well. So I guess having that balance, knowing the kind of what you want to fight and how far you want to take it, right?
At this point, I do a group for Black parents and children, the children 6 to 11 years old, and it's about cultural identity and understanding who you are, right? And it's really, I think sometimes when you build up your kids that way, they're able to navigate a little bit better in the system. Sometimes when you know who your identity or when you have the tools, and even as Black women, I would say, when I work with Black women or young Black girls, I say, my thing is always take up your space. Take up your space. Like, I think it's Rosie O'Neill that say that or something. Don't small up yourself when you're in a space. Right?
But at the same time, I think that you need both. You need to have, you want to call the fighting or the marching, you need that piece. But then you need the planning, the organizing to structure what you want to do. So I don't necessarily think you can have one without the other. I think that you need both of those pieces. And, about taking up your space is that you have a right to be there. You have a right to go, if you're college or whatever it is you're going to do, you have a right to take that spot and to progress and to do well. It shouldn't be any judgment on your color, you're here, you're Canadian, you have a right to be in our society.
I want to thank our guests for sharing their experiences today. If you are Black or racialized in school today, I know it's not easy and you are not alone. Anyone can be a great ally against racism. If you are an administrator, faculty, staff, or even a student, I want to leave you with this challenge: to listen, to learn, to think, but most importantly, to act. There's something that we can all do, and there's a role for you too. Please leave your comments and questions below, and don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell for notifications, and pass this video along. And until next time, keep living in your color.